Okay, ready to go.
Okay, I'm with John Jekovich,
Oh,
a highly,
420-2965.
a highly decorated World War II
Oh,
veteran.
Jesus.
And
Here
we're
we
going
go.
over his book, over 800 pages, Their Mother's Son. We're broadcasting far below in a hidden bunker above all the street noise above. And so we're going to start with John Jekovich. He had no complaints in the Battle of Bulge, and he's 98 years old, and he has no complaints now. What
Yeah.
was your military number again?
Huh?
What was your military number again?
420-2965.
There you go. Here we go. We're picking up on page 94, 194, and it's Gene, Saltus, and Bombers.
Yeah. Oh,
After
bomb.
the news, Gene suggested we go for a walk before I went back to the billets. I said a cordial good night to Mr. and Mrs. Young, thanking them for their gracious hospitality and mentioning that I would like to be invited back at some future date. They agreed and said they would look forward to seeing me again. How was Mr. and Mrs. Young dressed?
English.
How did Mr. Young look?
I had a vest on the tie.
Did he smoke at all?
No.
No. And how about Mrs. Young? How'd she look?
Well, she had a skirt and blouse on.
Very cordial?
Yeah.
Nice family?
Yeah.
All right.
No kids.
What's that?
No kids.
Okay. As we reached the street and began walking, I took Jean's hand and remarked that she had extremely great parents. I liked them already after only one of my first visits with them. She was pleased that I realized she would like hearing complimentary remarks concerning her parents. While we walked, we talked about many things, of which would be next year at this time. Overhead, we could hear the heavy drone of many aircraft in the distance, and I could not tell in which direction they were headed. When we reached the end of the street, there were several straight back benches which overlooked the entire village of Haverfordwest. As we sat there, we could see for a few miles. When the moon reappeared, it reminded me of the bluff at Owensboro and the lights of Evansville below. It became quite cool suddenly, and a stiff breeze started to pick up from the west. I sat closer to Jean, put my arm around her, and moved even closer to her. She looked up at me in the moment. I suddenly bent down and kissed her and held her for a moment in my arms. When I realized I had just done, I quickly stammered an apology for my inappropriate action and felt embarrassed and at a loss for a sensible explanation for my behavior. She smiled and took my hand and said she had a beautiful time tonight. I discerned her expression and goodness and quietly stated that I too had an enjoyable interlude and was pleased meeting and talking with her parents, but mostly I liked being with her. She smiled again and said the next time we meet, we should take a picnic lunch and go bicycling. I like that. The best time would be Saturday or Sunday, as there would usually being nothing going on the weekend, with the possible exception of some sort of detail. I was excited at the prospect, and Jean was pleased with the suggestion she had made and the way it had affected me. We discussed how we would be best communicate with one another. She finally came up with a solution that I call her at work during the day hours, and at night I could reach her at home. It suddenly struck me that this was a glaring familiar, something I have done through Anne in the past. Before I could contemplate its ramifications, Jean was enumerating several phone numbers which did not make any sense to me. They were phone numbers I had never seen before. For example, 0, 4, 3, 7, 7, 6, 5, 4, 2, 3. So those phone numbers look very foreign to you.
What?
Phone numbers look very foreign to you. When they would ring, did they make a different sound?
Yeah?
Did they make a different sound than we had here?
Yeah.
How would they ring? How would they sound when you ring their number?
Bell sounded bell, not a real crisp call.
Not like here.
No.
Okay.
Looks like they were half out.
Which only added to the confusion. I stated I would like to see her again this weekend, and she was in perfect agreement. Now, if I could only escape the weekend duty detail, this was beginning to sound familiar over and over again. Jean got up and reached for my hand. We started to slowly walk back towards the cottage. Upon reaching the front gate, and we went over our lines of communication once again, I made sure I had the correct phone numbers as I wrote them down on a piece of napkin I had in my pocket. We lingered for a few minutes, and then I reached down, took her in my arms, and kissed her goodnight. She held on to me for a few seconds and kissed me lightly on the cheek and murmured softly, "Good night, and thank you for the wonderful time tonight." With that, she turned and ran toward the front door and disappeared inside. Walking down to the orderly room and the billets, I thought over the last several hours what I was getting involved with again. I did not think so. Was I encouraging Jean? I did not think so. Was I having second thoughts about Anne? Certainly not. Then was making me feel as if I was betraying Anne, or at least discarding her feeling towards me. I think the major factor insofar as my relationship with Jean was the unconscious motivation that had to be a trifle bit machoism. In other words, it was almost expected of one to at least kiss a girl on the second or third date. Otherwise, she would feel unworthy, or worse yet, unattractive. Granted, Jean was attractive and inviting, so the compulsion was prevalent, and in reality, therefore, the motivation was easily put into motion. I did not feel it as I was on the rebound that Anne had rejected me. On the contrary, if there was any form of rejection as far as our relationship was concerned, it was all on my part. I was fortunate enough that I had met Jean and was looking forward to seeing and being with her again during the little time we had left here. The next morning, after chow, we were issued more cold water clothing. But the largest issue was a Jeep, trailer, and a assigned driver for each squad. We would take the Jeep trailer, then we'd cross the channel and use it as a part of our standard equipment in combat. The assigned driver of our squad was a replacement by the name of Fred Post, a former ASTP member with several years at college who was studying to become an attorney. Post wore thick-rimmed glasses and was apparently intelligent, but should have never been assigned to the infantry. In a way, he reminded me of Lake, and I thought now we have two people to look after and mother. Although Post was ASTP and surely displayed it, he did not have the attributes of ever becoming a good soldier and openly admitted to much with his own qualms and excuses. Whatever happened to Post?
Post, he got killed.
When?
When we were in the combat.
As soon as you went in, or was he in the combat for a few months?
No, he just went in.
And how did he get killed? Was he like doing something he shouldn't have, or just?
Well, he wasn't hunkering down. He wasn't hunkering down. So put your arms over your head, and then he didn't do it. He looked it up and seen what the
He looked
planes,
up and
he looked at what the planes were doing.
And he was in a foxhole at the time?
No, it was another culprit.
Culvert?
Yeah.
And so what did he get hit with?
Hit?
Yeah, what hit him? A machine gun?
Shrapnel.
Shrapnel. And all the shrapnel was coming from those bombs?
Artillery shell, the Germans shooting over.
Okay. He lived in a world of his own, and when he left to his own devices, would usually have some bail him out. Whenever he got in over his head, he was quiet, even-tempered person who did not put on any display of his background or flaunt his good fortune in being intelligent and articulate. He was never boring or tiresome to have around, and was always the perfect gentleman. Fink assigned post to a bunk in our squad room, and we all got better acquainted with him. He was from New York City, Upper Manhattan, and both of his parents were attorneys. There was nothing pretentious about his mannerisms, as the case with most of the ASTP and Air Corps that I come in contact with. Although Poe spoke articulately in 3-syllable words in a lengthy discourses, it did not make him feel uneasy, since he did so naturally and with such polish and refinement. We all thought it was his true nature. The only negative aspect we found to be true was that he did not take to showering too often. He wore his clothes too long without changing them. It would not take long before we would join him in the two attributes outside of that post, as we called him, adjusted into our immediate circle. We all accepted him and became well liked. The next time I was assigned to fire watch in our building, luckily I had 400 to 600 hours tour. Lambert from the 2nd platoon woke me at 4:15 hours and stayed with me until I finally was awake and dressed. As I walked about the buildings, feeding the soft coal lumps into the fireplace in the various rooms, I thought how similar this was to what I've done at Upton. The only exception was now I was on the opposite side of the Atlantic, with prospects of arriving on the continent any day. Most of the rooms were the same size and layout, with the exception of the larger room on the west wall of the building. This was taken over by Captain Droulard and headquarters platoon of 10 to 12 men. This was the only room that had its door locked at night, and as a consequence, we did not service its fireplace. I found out later headquarters platoon did their own security and fire watch, independent of the rest of the company. The time went quickly, and since my watch was over at 0600 hours, I retrieved my towel and shaving equipment in preparation for a shower before it got too crowded in the shower room. Walking toward the shower building, I was reminded this was Sunday morning, and I should get in touch with Jean to find out her plans for the weekend. I felt certain it would have no further details thrust upon me for the remainder of the weekend, so I decided to call Jean from a public pay box after noon chow. Calling on an English public phone was no simple task. First of all, I had to get the right number of change, and it seemed like play Monopoly we used when we played Monopoly, play money when we used to play Monopoly when I was younger. Then I had to figure out the numerals on a rotary dial. After several futile and unavailing attempts, I succeeded in getting through. Mrs. Young answered the phone, and there again I had a difficult time conversing with her, as neither one of us understood the other was to try to convey. I would interrupt her when she would be speaking, and she would do the same. This would go on for a while. Finally, she understood and handed the phone to Jean. I detected a bit of amusement in her voice as she spoke. She apologized for her mother's Welsh accent, which was nearly impossible to understand over the phone. I asked her about the bicycle ride she promised me, and if 1,400 hours would be too soon. Without hesitating, she said that was fine,
Here's a
and
couple
she would
candy.
expect me,
Here. Here's a couple
and
candy.
she would expect me then.
What are
We
these?
talked a while, and then said our goodbyes, once again confirming our date that afternoon.
Huh?
I went back to the billets when I discovered Leip had gone to London on a 3-day pass with several people from the second quad. I didn't know that you were able to take a pass to London. Wasn't that 200 miles away?
Yeah.
And wasn't London the target of many bombings?
Well, there were spots that were clear.
There are spots in London that are clear.
You get a day when the Germans weren't flying.
All right, let me try to understand this. How would a soldier in Haverfordwest get to London 200 miles away?
35 miles away,
200 miles away, I thought it was.
there was a bus running.
A bus.
A city bus was
A
running.
city bus would take
And then
long.
they had several buses from the army with pickup trucks.
Did you ever go to London on your break?
Yeah.
And
I didn't like it.
You didn't like it? Tell me why.
It was blacked out all the time.
So what'd you do when you were in London?
Went to a movie, went to a show, walked around the streets, went to a place to eat someplace.
Did you take Jean with you to London?
No,
No. Was it much busier than Haverfordwest?
it was a lot bigger. Oh yeah,
Yeah.
bigger and sophisticated more.
Was there many vehicles on the road?
Military.
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 And if Fink had gotten charge of quarters for the next 24 hours, he asked me what plans we had for the weekend as we prepared to leave to go on duty. I said I would probably just hang around the area and possibly take a walk about the countryside. I knew that afternoon I had to sign out and Fink would be at the orderly room and would see my name on the sign-out sheet, one way or the other. When it came time to leave to see Jean, I walked into the orderly room because Fink was nowhere to be found. I signed out with the present time and after my name, I proceeded up a steep incline to Jean's place. Upon arriving, I saw Jean outside waving cheerfully at me as I approached her. She said she had 2 bicycles besides her and a large wicker picnic basket
Oh boy.
tied down to the luggage rack behind her bike. She informed me that her father's bicycle, which was larger than 2, and gleefully inquired if I could ride a bicycle. Could you ride a bicycle okay then?
Oh yeah.
And to show her my prowess on a bike, I gave her a demonstration right there. Suffice to say, I almost fell off, as the English bicycles are a little bit different than the American bikes.
They're a
How
lot
come they're
higher.
different?
They're a lot higher.
Higher up,
Yeah.
they have thin-walled tires, and the seats are much more elevated than I was used to. Also, the handlebars are at a difficult angle, much more like our racing bikes, only more so.
That's funny.
Huh?
You almost fell off?
Huh?
You almost fell?
Fell? Yeah.
It was an ideal time to ride a bike. The temperature was 40 to 50 degrees, slight overcast with no threat of rain. Jean decided to head out in a northerly direction on Highway A40, the same route the company had taken on our last hike. There was no vehicle traffic at all, only some horse-drawn 2-wheel carts and several bicyclists, such as I stayed behind Jean on the curves and the steep overlooks. Otherwise, I rode beside her as I became accustomed to the bicycle. She wore a full skirt and reached several inches below her knees, but when she would pedal faster, the wind caught her just right. It was afforded the opportunity to witness a beautiful pair of legs and thighs. She wore flat-heeled shoes, but even with those nondescript attributes, she displayed a pair of trim ankles. As I followed her, I could not help noticing the trim figure, and she sat on the rigid bicycle seat, moving her legs up and down as she pedaled. She was aware of my watching her, but it did not seem to distract her in the least bit. After an hour or so pedaling, we took our first break. It was somewhat breathless, was still breathing normally. She cheerfully reminded me that I was still not acclimated to the higher altitude and were steadily climbing higher as we rode. A short while later, after the break, I found a spot under a large clump of majestic oak trees. Jean knelt to lay out our picnic lunch. As I watched her, it reminded me of Anne and our picnics together. And it all seemed so far remote from what I was experiencing now. The entire setting was peaceful and tranquil, and it was hard to imagine a war going on only a short distance away. It was beginning to acquire fondness for the area's beauty as I stretched out on the velvet soft grass under the tree. There were skylarks soaring overhead, intermingled with buzzards and their graceful gliding about as they searched for their next meal. I could hear strange, persistent bird calls, with Jean informed me were curlews in the mating season, going through the ritual and they're selecting their mates. Also, the way of the autumn migration season, the last of the waiting birds settled in for the day in the mud flats, which were also the feeding grounds. I felt a special empathy for the place and wished that I could linger here longer and return someday. Jean had laid out a strange and mysterious lunch as she accepted to explain of her native dishes she prepared. There was a Welsh lamb. How's a Welsh lamb? How was that? A Welsh lamb. How was that?
Clam?
Welsh lamb. How was the Welsh?
The lamb was greasy.
Greasy?
Greasy.
With layer bread made out of seaweed. How was that?
Rye bread.
Also several species of dried fish.
Yeah.
How was that?
Fish was good.
Fish was good. To name a few, salmon, trout, mackerel, and crab.
Yeah. A lot of different fish around there.
Yeah. There are also Pembrokeshire potatoes. How are the potatoes?
Potatoes are good.
Pembrokeshire turkey, and finally warm tea and a variety of crumpets. How was that?
Warm tea and the crumpets are terrible.
Why?
Well, I don't drink warm tea. That's all I do is everything's got to be warm. Nothing's cold or hot.
Did you ever run across all the years that you're in Europe, any ice cubes? Any ice cubes all the time you were there?
No.
No, I didn't think so. All in all, I was surprised at its edibility and thought everything was tasty and filling. I complimented Jean on the success and mastery of the lunch and stated she had all this without any aid of thermos bottles or any ice. I had to explain the last statement somewhat and was amused at the difference and the refinements we display in our varied cultures. As we sat there sipping our tea, we talked about the war and how long it would last. She asked if I was apprehensive about going into combat. I said I was more than apprehensive. I was scared out of my wits, and added, just thinking about it made me more frightful and unpleasant. She smiled and asked, do you have a special girl back home? And without thinking or hesitating, I answered no. There is no one at home at all I care that much for. But I write occasionally to one of my two friends. She asked quickly, would you write to me when you have the opportunity? Did you ever write to her?
Lakewood, yeah.
No, when you left that Haverfordwest, did you ever write to Jean?
No.
No.
Nope.
You broke hearts.
Huh?
You broke hearts wherever you went.
I said,
That's wartime.
I said that I would, and she must give me her address. She asked about my family. I replied with my usual short answers, and always did not elaborate on it. It was more self-conscious talking about my family with Jean than I was with Anne. It was always mystified me when I was reminded of it. At times I would try to reason it out while I felt that way, but to no avail. I should be content with just the memory of the two of them and their own environments. I did mention that she had loving and caring parents, and she felt very fortunate and appreciative of that. She replied quickly that she loved her parents very much and would miss them terribly. If she were in the same circumstances,
What?
what's going on here, Jenny?
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah.
He's moving all over the place. At times I would not,
Okay.
I did mention that she had loving and caring parents. I envied her relationship with her parents
Let me call you right back, okay?
as I did Anne's, as it only reinforced my belief that some of us were successful than others in this respect. Did you ask him why he's moving?
Yeah, come up a little closer, John.
A little closer?
Yeah.
I could never bring myself to be as forthright as Jean and Anne when they talked about their families. As I helped her gather up the remains of our picnic, I felt compelled to kiss her again, both out of desire of my part and also out of expectation, I believe she sought. We lay on the soft, sweet-smelling grass, which was towering oak trees, as our canopy and screen, oblivious to anything or anyone about us as we embraced and kissed among the snowdrops and the pink thrifts.
Hey, stand by.